It is now my pleasure to introduce our featured speaker for this evening. I had the pleasure of meeting this man last night, and he is nothing short, actually, of adorable. He's also a phenomenal human being. He was an NFL football player. He's an advocate. He's a professor at NYU, and he's also a self-proclaimed feminist. Let's take a look at some of the amazing accomplishments through his ever-growing career.
Educator, activist, and former pro football player Wade Davis. He made headlines of his own when he came out of the closet in 2012.
I would say that most people who never been gay and in the closet don't understand the double consciousness that happens, right? Like having to spend energy trying to keep it a secret and to tell all the lies. You know, I was a fantastic liar.
I wasn't out because I did not feel safe. And I don't use the idea that I came out. What I did was I invited the rest of the world in.
How large a group of closeted gay athletes are there?
Just based on numbers, there's probably one or two on each team, you know, and most of them are not closeted, you know. Their teammates know who they are. They just don't care because they're making plays.
There's a larger discussion to be had around sexism, that a male has to act a certain way, a female has to act a certain way, and if we don't start to do away with that, then we really won't do the work to really create a space in sports where anyone, regardless of their gender expression, can show up.
When Michael was drafted to the Rams, he famously kissed his boyfriend on television live for the world to see. What was going through your head when you saw that?
During one of the biggest weekends in sports, you get to watch two men kiss. That's never happened before during the sport of football, right? So what does that mean for a young gay boy who's watching this, thinking that, wow, maybe football is for me. Maybe sports is a space where I can be accepted in.
We explore that with Wade Davis, a former NFL player who came out as gay after he retired. He's executive director of the You Can Play project, an advocacy group working for equality for LGBT athletes in sports.
So what we're trying to do now is educate athletes, coaches, and everyone that, hey, like, if you create the right culture where your athletes feel safe to come out, you will immediately get a better player. And if you want your team to be successful, you want all of your players to be able to live in their own truth. I met so many amazing heroes and sheroes that were 15 years old and they were out.
Wow.
And someone reached out to me, a friend of mine named Sid Ziegler, and he asked, can I write your story? And I said, you can write my story if you tell their story, if you talk about the work that I'm doing. So not only can my story be used to shine light on homophobia in sports, but also the living conditions that youth of color primarily face in this city.
I deal with youth that are trying to find housing, or who are trying to go to college, or do so many, in my opinion, bigger things than play in the NFL or play a sport. They need to hear it from me. So I'm gonna say, you know what? So yeah. So be out, be proud, be yourself, but also find that family, that community that will support you.
The new campaign is challenging the notion that African Americans are more resistant to same-sex relationships than other groups. This Is Love is a multimedia campaign celebrating LGBTQ acceptance in the Black community, and it is culminating in a town hall discussion tomorrow at the Human Rights Campaign in Washington, D.C.
There's an old African proverb that says, until the lion has a historian, the hunter will always be the hero. So part of our campaign is for you all to share your story. So there is a new historian out there that we can share our stories of love and affection and admiration towards each other.
Love erases that space between you and me, right? So if we can show each other love, if we can show up vulnerably, right, and know that vulnerability is a strength.
Because that's how we end this epidemic, by this idea of fictive kinship.
Our young kids are growing up never believing that they will be loved. So we have to change this narrative. We have to add to the narrative, because what Lee Daniels is showing is true, but also what everyone's writing about is also true as well.
We are all family, regardless of your age, your race, your class, your gender. We are all family. And I would hope that anyone who met me this week will tell you that Wade treated me like I was a part of his family.
Welcome one of our greatest athlete activists and definitely one of the cutest cornerbacks to ever play in the NFL, Mr. Wade Davis.
You're gonna make me nervous now, come on. Thank you all so very much. First, I just want to address the elephant in the room that you all are thinking. Like, that little guy did not play in the NFL. Right? Yes, this little fast, big-headed kid from Louisiana did play in the NFL. But first, I just want to say thank you to HRC, thank you to Molly, and I want to thank 3 special women that I had a chance to meet this weekend. Julia, and Macy. I had, you 3 women embody everything that I want my little girls, when I have little girls, to be. You're so self-possessed, you show up in your own skin, and that's really something that I've always strived to do. So thank you so much for welcoming me this weekend, so thank you. But I want to ask you all 2 questions. The first question is, why are we here? Why are we here? And the second question is, do you show up as a savior or do you show up as a social justice worker? And there is a difference. When I was in high school, in the 10th grade, was the first time I understood that I was gay. And there was one openly gay kid in my school, and we'll call him John Smith. And John Smith, he showed up with the type of fierce courageousness that I always wanted to have. But I hated John Smith. So I called John Smith a faggot every single day, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. Because what John Smith didn't realize was that he was my hero, that I wanted to be John Smith, that the type of courage he exhibited I had never seen before, and it frightened me. So I resisted that, and I hated him. And I know now that hatred is actually a form of self-hatred, that I just hated me because I didn't think that I could ever be gay. I internalized so many of the awful messages that were out there about what it meant to be gay. And I never thought that I could be this amazing athlete and then also like men. So because of that, I bullied John Smith every single day, and I've tried to reach out and to apologize to John, but rightfully so, he won't speak to me. And then a beautiful thing happened. I invited the world in, and I don't use the language of coming out you saw in the video because we as LGBT people, we don't come out, we're already out. We invite you in to get to know us. We aren't some people who live in this proverbial closet. We're human beings, we're right here in front of you. You know, closets are places for wire hangers or smelly shoes. They're not for human beings, and we are human beings, so we were never in some closet. The world wasn't safe for us to come out. But when we invite you in, we're expecting you to love us, not to tolerate us. And I had the privilege of working at a place called the Hedrick Martin Institute in New York City. And I met, yes, thank you so much. I met so many amazing young sheroes and heroes who taught me, again, what real courage is. They embodied courage. Because I used to show up as a savior. I used to show up thinking that I'm here to save you, that your problems are mine to fix. I didn't see them as my equal. And I used to say interesting things like, you all are at risk. But I realize now that young people are not at risk, they're at promise. And it's our responsibility as adults who have access, who have privilege, to allow them to see their actual promise. Because we're all at risk to something. But our young people, the young people who you fight for, the young people that HRC fights for, are not at risk, they're at promise. Because words and language matters. I internalized every word and everything that was said about me, and that made me hate myself. So imagine what certain language does when we talk about the young people that we serve. But these young people, when I showed up, I still had a lot of self-hatred. And I used to say things like, I'm gay, but I'm not a faggot like them. Because again, I showed up as a savior, not seeing them as my equal, not seeing them as my mirror. I didn't embody the idea of fictive kinship. And fictive kinship means that we're all family. That as I see you, I say, you are my brother. You are my sister. You are me. You're my mirror. And the work that I have to do in this world doesn't look at me in the mirror every day. So I fight like crazy against sexist oppression. I fight like crazy against ableism. I just don't worry about the things that look at me in the mirror every day. That's the work that we have to do. That's why you're here. That's what, if you give up not just your money, but of your time with organizations like the Lighthouse to really show up every day, because these kids need to see you. They need to be able to ask you the questions that they've always wanted to, like, what's it like to work at a Kroger? What's it like to be the CEO of a company? Those are those intimate questions that your money can't provide. But that's what I learned from working with these amazing young kids. Because I used to say things like, why do all these kids have HIV? Why don't they just put a condom on? And then I had a young man come up to me and say, hey, Mr. Davis, I want to share with you my story. And he told me at the age of 14, he was kicked out of his home. And in New York City, homelessness looks very different than what I experienced in Colorado. And he told me that at 14, he didn't know what to do because school wasn't of importance to him. What was important was eating, finding somewhere to sleep. And he did something that I often demonize called sex work, because that was his only asset that he thought he had to survive. So could I demonize this 14-year-old kid for using his body to survive? I couldn't. And he told me for a couple years he lived on the street and he survived off of his body. And then he met a boy, a beautiful boy who invited him in. And he stayed with this boy for a couple months and they fell in love. And it was the first time he felt love from another human being who really saw him and embraced him. And the boy says, hey, I love you. Let's have sex without a condom. And at this point, this kid now has a choice to make. On one hand, he could say no and risk going back out on the street. Or he could say yes to the one person in his entire life that's ever loved him and embraced him. And he looked at me and he said, what would you do? And he said, that's how I contracted HIV, because I gave of myself to the one person that loved me. And he looked at me and asked me again, he said, why are you here? And I learned from these young people what courage really looks like, how to embody my favorite quote in the world by Maya Angelou that says, courage is the most important virtue, because without it, no other virtue can be practiced consistently. And the consistency is what that our young people need. That's the work that HRC is doing to be consistent, because love humbles. Love humbles you. Love teaches you that to show up to do real social justice works, compassion is an exchange of equals. So I implore you that as you leave here today, show up with the type of compassion that humbles, that is equal, that when you look in the mirror every day, you just don't worry about the things that affect you, because there's so many amazing people out there who need you to show up in their lives every day. Thank you so much.